Oh, darn it. Look at that. I made it through this whole week without changing the slideshow. I guess you get to look at Pitt, photos from Pitt, West Virginia for one more day, and then maybe by the time we get to Monday's Morning Pitt, I'll have the slideshow updated with photos from Pitt Boston College or Pitt Louisville or something like that. But oh well. I mean, Pitt's road uniforms are pretty sweet. They're not as nice as the retro road uniforms back in 2016 or 2017. I guess is when they busted those out. 2018. I mean, those were elite uniforms, but Pitt's road unis, the ice whites right there. I think I might like the yellow pants better, but it's fine. You can look at that for one more day before we jump into next week's Morning Pits, and I'll try and get the slideshow updated for there. But I was just too excited to get started because it's the mailbag. We always look forward to doing this on Fridays, the Morning Pit Mailbag, where I take questions from Pitt fans on Panther-Lair.com and answer as many as we can right here in the Friday edition of the Morning Pit. I always look forward to this. Hopefully you do as well. And I think everything else I want to say about that. We have great questions this week. We always have great questions. Definitely looking forward to jumping into it. So let's stop wasting time. Let's go. Morning Pit Mailbag, Friday edition of the Morning Pit, right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's the Friday edition of the Morning Pit. You know what we always do on Fridays? We take questions from Pitt fans at Panther-Lair.com, and we answer as many as we can right here in the mailbag. It's my favorite day of the week. Hopefully it's yours. I mean, I'm sure it is your favorite day of the week because it's Fridays, and everybody loves a Friday. I enjoy it because I like doing these mailbags. It's the one day a week where I don't have to really think of a topic. I mean, there's never any shortage of things to talk about when it comes to Pitt sports, but I don't really have to think of a topic. I just let you guys ask the questions, and then I answer as many as we can here on Friday. And so it's fun. We tend to go all over the place. Sometimes I look at the questions ahead of time. Sometimes I wait until right before I click record to look at the questions, and sometimes that works out, and sometimes it doesn't. There's actually a question this week, a trivia question, that I've had to tap a few trusted resources, and hopefully they get back to me over the course. I just sent a couple text messages to people who know the answer to this question right before I hit record. So I will hopefully get an answer in the midst of this, in the midst of taping this. And if not, we'll have to come back to it at a later date. But either way, let's jump into the questions here in the Morning Pit Mailbag, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Dylan7119 says, realistically, how long is the leash? Is there any scenario where Pat Narduzzi is shown the door at the end of the season? If so, what is that scenario? Just the same garbage over and over, but the money complicates things given Heather likes the parting gift. I know we don't have the resources of other programs who have been much quicker on the trigger, but we really don't have the luxury of time in a realignment world. All right, so a lot of editorializing there from Dylan7119. The question, though, realistically, how long is the leash? Is there any scenario where Pat Narduzzi is shown the door at the end of the season? If so, what is that scenario? I don't, I can't sit here and say, well, he's got to win X number of games, or if he loses X number of games, he's gone. Is there any scenario where Pitt makes a coaching change? Yeah, I think there is. I still think it's a slim chance, and I think that for a few reasons. One, I mean, I think there is the matter of the buyout. I mean, just like we've talked about with Jeff Capel and several of the last few years, there's a question of, is it really the best way to spend your money to pay someone to go away, to pay someone to not work for you while you're also paying the replacement for that person? Like, that's a lot of money invested in one spot. This is not the exact same thing, but it sort of reminds me of, you hear like, should you offer one kid at a high school to get his teammate? You know what I mean? It's sort of a package deal. And I remember a coach saying, you don't use two scholarship spots on one player. Well, that logic is somewhat flawed because you're inevitably going to have scholarship spots that are used on players who don't really contribute. So maybe it's not the worst thing if you can get a truly elite player. And I guess you could maybe say the same thing here, where it's not the worst thing to pay two coaches for one job if you're really getting an upgrade and a really good option to come in there. And, I don't know. I don't know what kind of options there might be. I don't know what kind of possibilities would exist out there. I think you have to look at this whole thing. And there's another question. Let me see where I want to... even Evan Man Pitt asks, who is Pitt's football coach in 2026? So, I mean, there's a couple of questions like along those lines. And I think it comes down, I think you have to think about it from Alan Green's perspective. All right. And what Alan Green has seen and what he has witnessed. I mean, he's hired for the job. Pitt is In their most recent season, they went 3-9. He gets hired. They're 6-0. They win the Syracuse game, first game after he's hired. And then they lose the next 5 to round out the regular season and say, wow, that got ugly in a hurry. And then you have the Toledo game. And you say, wow, this that was really bad. And then you come into this season and, you beat Duquesne and Central Michigan, whatever, that doesn't move the needle one way or the other. But then you have the last 2 games and you say, those were really bad. And you start looking at the totality of what Alan Green has witnessed. He's seen 3 wins and 8 losses since he got hired. And you don't make the decision entirely off of that, but you came into a program that went 3-9 the year before you got here. Since the time you got hired, they've been 3-8. It doesn't feel like things are trending in the right direction. And so, is there a scenario where Pat Narduzzi has shown the door at the end of the season? Yeah, if things keep going like they are now, and that doesn't necessarily mean losing out and going 2-10 or something like that. But if they keep losing games like they've lost these last 2, like they lost the Toledo game, like they lost the Boston College game, like they lost the Virginia game, like they lost the Clemson game, because it's not just losing, it's how you lose. Sometimes that further complicates it. I mean, you didn't just lose to Toledo. You embarrassed yourself against Toledo. You didn't just lose to West Virginia and Louisville. You wasted those games. You wasted those opportunities. You lost to Clemson because, you take 3 false starts from the 1. What are you doing? Where's the organization here? Where's the leadership here? And so that's what Alan Green has walked in and seen. That's been his experience of Pitt football under Pat Narduzzi. And he can see the trophies, the 2 Coastal trophies and the ACC Championship trophy from 2021. Like, he can see that, and he can see the first-team All-Americans and the draft picks and all of that stuff. But what he's actually witnessed, what he's actually experienced, has been some bad football and some losing football. And that's been, that's what he knows firsthand of Pitt football. And so, is there a scenario where they make a coaching change? Yeah, there probably is. And you can understand why, from Alan Green's perspective, you might want to do that. Now, it's one thing to want to do it, and it's another thing to be able to afford to do it. It's another thing to have the stomach to pay that kind of money to do it. But if it keeps up like it has been, I think there will be real conversations and real discussions, and those discussions might already be happening. Richard2928 says, what are your thoughts about the Louisville players saying that Pitt players acted like they didn't want to play anymore? If true, that says a lot about Narduzzi and the staff. I don't know. It says a lot about everybody, right? I think after the second interception, there was a lot. After the first interception against Louisville, I think a lot of the wind went out, out of the sails or out of the balloon or whatever it is. And after the second interception, I think the players probably felt pretty defeated. Because you're down there, you get the big pass to Blue Hicks, you're set up 1st and goal at the 4, you're about to score a touchdown, take a 2-touchdown lead, and pretty much lock up the win. You've bounced back from the loss at West Virginia. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't pretty, but you bounced back, you got the win, and you're moving forward. You got a little positive momentum. And on the first play, you throw a pick. And now, momentum is totally swung back. And then by the time you throw the second interception, I think probably those players have resigned themselves to losing. Not that they said, oh, well, we lost, we're not going to try. But, it's hard not to be a human being there. What were you thinking? What were you feeling when that second interception was thrown? And so, everybody should always give their all on every play, 110%, and, et cetera, et cetera. But we're all human, and you're going to get beat down by a difficult situation, particularly coming off the West Virginia game. So, That's my thoughts on it. That's my thoughts. I don't know if it reflects more on the players or the staff. I don't know who it reflects on. I think teams get beat down. They get dejected with tough losses, tough circumstances, and the other team might see it. The other team might see it. Pugs35 asked the trivia question that we did get a text message response to. Aside from Kenny Pickett and Pat Bostic, who else has started at quarterback for Pitt as a true freshman? Does it go back to Marino before Pat Bostic? And NC Panther 99 actually said maybe Darnell Dickerson in the Gottfried era, and that was. Darnell Dickerson was the last true freshman before Pat Bostic and Kenny Pickett to start at Pitt. I believe that was 1987 is what I'm being told. So I'm literally getting text messages about this as we're recording it. I mean, this is happening in real time for me. You're watching it after the fact, but it was happening in real time for me as we went through this. But yeah, it was Darnell Dickerson was the last true freshman quarterback to start for Pitt prior to Kenny Pickett and Pat Bostic. And what a strange random question with no clear apparent ties to the current day. Why ever would you be wondering about that? Jay Lazinger says, have you ever seen a worse non-call than that fair catch, quote-unquote, tackle? No, that was bad. And what made it bad? The thing that made it the worst, all right? The worst part about that is they threw a flag. They threw a flag and then picked it up. It'd be one thing to not throw a flag on it and be like, what are you looking at? How could you not? But to throw a flag, for someone to say, yes, this was an illegal play, and someone else to say, oh, no, he actually got blocked into him. Like, that makes it worse. I mean, I think, one of the worst calls I've seen in a game, or one of the worst almost kind of screw jobs a little bit, was that Virginia game last year where they got a second try at 4th and 1. And I understand why that happened. I understood the situation like that, but ultimately Virginia screwed up and got a second shot at 4th down as a result. That was pretty bad. And ultimately, you could say that cost Pitt the game. The fair catch interference, I mean, you threw a flag on it. You thought it was bad enough to be a penalty. And somebody else comes in and says, no, he got blocked into him, which he didn't. It was BS. Now, Kenny Johnson still should get away from the ball, right? I mean, he needs to be a little more decisive, a little quicker with it. But, I'm not faulting Kenny Johnson there. It was a bad call. The Virginia thing last year might have been worse. Beyond that, it's hard for me to remember. I mean, the Notre Dame game in 2012 where they missed that Notre Dame had 2 players with the same number on. I mean, that might be – that was pretty bad. Because I think Pitt missed the field goal on that, and then either the penalty would have given them a first down or at least given Kevin Harper another shot at the field goal. I forget exactly what it was in a game that went in overtime. That would have been a pretty important set of 3 points to get, but I digress. I mean, it's hard once you go back further in time to try and remember bad calls because the reality is there's bad calls in every game. Some are more egregious than others. Some are more notable than others, but there are always bad calls. And so those are some of the most recent memories, the fair catch interference, and then that 4th down nonsense last year with the Virginia game. But there's probably bad calls all the time. Maybe I would say those are my top 3. That might be my top 3 worst calls. The fair catch interference, the 4th down retry, and then the 2 number 2s at Notre Dame. Let's put those up in the top. Let's see. Scrolling through here. MGH421 says, do you think the Keith Gouveia injury will torpedo the offensive line like the Branson Taylor injury did last year? I thought the offensive line played well against Louisville. Yeah, they were fine. I didn't, I thought they were fine. I think they've been fine all year. Not great, but good enough, which we could say about a lot of parts of this team right now. I don't think it'll have the same kind of effect that the Branson Taylor injury had because what made the Branson Taylor injury such a killer for that team last year is not just that they had to replace their left tackle. Like, that's bad enough. When your starting left tackle goes down, that's going to put you, behind by quite a bit. The problem was how they responded to it and reacted, where they had like 3 more guys started at left tackle. Like Terrence Eno started at left tackle and maybe somebody else, or maybe they just moved Ryan Baer over there. And they started shuffling all these guys around. So you had multiple starting left tackles. You had multiple starting right tackles. You're moving guys in and out and all around. It was a messy situation, and it was made worse. What made it so damaging is all the shuffling that it entailed. Like in this case, they should be able to put Ryan Coretta in, and he'll be fine at left guard. And if they really need to go somebody else, maybe they can go to Kendall Stanley or something like that. They're not going to need to move Ryan Baer over, or BJ Williams over, or Lyndon Cooper over, or move Jeff Percy inside, or move. It's not going to affect other positions other than left guard, the way last year's Branson Taylor injury affected other positions other than left tackle. So I don't think it'll torpedo things, in that same way. I mean, I think it's a step down. I don't know where I would rank Gouveia among the, I I don't know where it would rank Keith Gouveia among like Pitt's, top 5 offensive linemen if he's 4 or 5 or 3 or whatever. But I mean, I think Coretta should be okay. And again, the fact that it shouldn't have to change the personnel at the other 4 spots, I think is the key. Fears of Choice says, who has a shorter leash, Cade Bell or Pat Narduzzi? That's an interesting question. I don't know if it'll come to a situation where one leash depends on the other, if you know what I mean. Kind of you change the offensive coordinator or we'll change the head coach. I don't know if it would come to that kind of situation. I don't know if that's how Alan Green would approach it. I've never been a big fan of that. We've talked about that a million times over the years. But maybe that's the approach that Alan Green would want to take, to be that hands-on and involved with the operation of the football program. Of course, if Pat Narduzzi's leash turns out to be the shortest, then that's going to also probably take Cade Bell out of the picture, right? So I'm not really sure who has the shortest leash. At this point, I think everybody probably should feel like they've got a certain amount of pressure. Pitt is it 4211 says, what is the Des Reed injury anyway? I believe it's been termed lower body. I think it's an ankle, and we'll see if he's able to play on Saturday. Let's see. Chris 46 says, when will the ACC refs be held accountable for BS calls? I mean, go around every conference, every team in the country, they'll tell you their conference has the worst refs. NFL tells you that they have, NFL teams will always tell you the NFL refs, officiating is as bad as it's ever been. I mean, we have all this slow motion and close-up cameras. We can see things much more clearly and easily than you can see it in real time, and so the refs get calls bad. That it's inevitable. It happens, and everybody thinks their refs are the worst refs. It's just like if you want to be amused, you can read the message boards of some of the sites on the Rivals Network or the 24/7 Network or wherever, and they all are convinced that the national recruiting analysts hate their team. Like, I've seen Alabama fans complain that, oh, you guys always underrate Alabama commitments. Yeah, because you had the number 1 recruiting class for 5 years in a row. Clearly, your guys were underrated. Everybody thinks they've got the worst. Everybody thinks their officiating is the worst. I don't know if the ACC is particularly any worse than the Big 12 or the SEC or the MAC or whoever else. Guys blow calls, and they always have. It's one of the oldest cliches in football that there's holding on every play. It's true, and it doesn't always get called. Most of them don't get called. It's just the nature of the game, that there are going to be bad calls. And I think for the most part, they generally tend to even out from one team to the other. Left Coast Panther says, is Blaine Spires out? And if so, is the end spot on that side really Joey Zielinski and Nate Temple? Is it safe to assume Isaiah Neal will shift to the end spot? I don't know. I don't know about it. I don't know if Blaine Spires is out. When he left the field on Saturday, or when he left the game against Louisville, it's not like he was down on the grass or he got helped off or anything like that. He just didn't come back in after a certain point. So I'm not really sure about the severity of his injury. That would make me think that maybe he'll be ready to go. I guess they could play Isaiah Neal outside, but they do have a solid rotation going there with the 4 tackles with Brew and James and Fitzsimmons and Neal. I guess Jasir Whittington could step in there. I don't know. If they spent this week practicing Isaiah Neal outside at end. I think he's quick enough to do it. I think he's got the size to do it and could do it. But I don't know. I don't know if they would do that. Let's see. Scrolling through here. JFF report says, what's going on with the wide receiver rotation? Do we have snap counts and target numbers available for the first 4 games? We do. The receiver rotation is basically Raphael Williams, Kenny Johnson, and Blue Hicks, and then a pretty big drop-off to everybody else. If you look at the snap counts, the top 6 guys right now in snaps so far through 4 games, and this will change, but the top 4 guys in snaps through 4 games are the 5 starting offensive linemen and Eli Holstein. Lenny Cooper, Jeff Percy, B.J. Williams, Eli Holstein, Ryan Baer, and Keith Gouveia in that order. Now, that's going to change because Gouveia is not going to play any more snaps. He's done for the season. But after those 6, the 5 O linemen and the quarterback, the next 3 guys in snaps are the three receivers. Raphael Williams has 210 snaps. Kenny Johnson has 190. Blue Hicks has 161. So Johnson's about 20 snaps. This is all according to Pro Football Focus. These are offensive snaps we're talking about. Johnson's about 20 snaps behind Williams, which means about 5 snaps per game. Deuce Spann is at 88 snaps, so a little more than half of Blue Hicks, and Hicks being the third out of those top 3 guys. So they've really honed in on Williams, Johnson, and Hicks. Those are the main guys. They're the ones that are playing the most. And then you have to drop off to Deuce Spann and Zion Fowler-El, and then Bryce Yates, who's got 32 snaps in 3 games. I don't think he played against – let me click on that. I don't think he played against – he didn't play against Louisville. He only played 2 snaps against West Virginia. Had a big catch. Didn't score a touchdown. Probably should have. In terms of targets, according to Pro Football Focus, Raphael Williams has 25 this year. Kenny Johnson has 20. Blue Hicks has 15. And then you get down to Justin Holmes has 10. Zion Fowler-El has 10. Deuce Spann has 9. So again, you have your top 3 guys, your clear top 3. That's the top tier. With 25, 20, and 15 for Williams, Johnson, and Hicks respectively. So I think the wide receiver rotation right now is those 3 guys are getting the snaps, those 3 guys are getting the targets, and they'll rotate when they need to or have to. I don't think there's been a big concern about fatigue with those guys or overworking them because Pitt's offense isn't staying on the field all that much. They're not getting enough playing time to really, I think, get worn down. They're coming off the field so often with 3 and outs and failed drives and everything like that, that they're not. I don't think they're like getting overworked or relying on those guys too much. Just kind of looking in the ACC, Raphael Williams, Pitt's leader in targets with 25, is 19th among wide receivers in the conference in targets. And actually, if you add in tight ends, he drops to 23rd because there are a few tight ends. Who is it? Justin Joly from NC State, Keyshawn Brown, or not him, Jeremiah Franklin from Boston College, actually coming in this weekend, 30 targets. He's got 21 catches for 206 yards and a touchdown. Dan Villari, you remember him, old friend from Syracuse. He's got 29 targets in 5 games, and Mason Minnie at Cal has 28 targets in 5 games. So there are tight ends who are getting targeted more. Actually, if we add in the running backs, that doesn't change anything. Raphael Williams, so he's 23rd among receivers and tight ends in targets in the conference, and that's Pitt's number 1 guy. So, I think what you have with the wide receiver rotation and the targets and everything like that, it's really a matter of just not as many plays and not as many snaps and not as many opportunities on the field because they're just not extending drives. They're losing time of possession. They're not running as many plays, and they're getting outgained. And so, when you talk about what's going on with the wide receiver rotation, they're running those 3 guys out there as much as they can because they're the 3 best receivers, and they're hoping that they can get some extended drives, which is obviously one of the biggest things they're missing so far this year. A lot of third down numbers that we've been talking about, we're publishing on Panther-Lair.com. It all points to that conclusion. They're just not extending their possessions. All right, great questions this week. Thanks, everybody, for chiming in. We appreciate it, and glad we could sit down for the mailbag. Of course, tomorrow we'll have the live post-game show after the Pitt-Boston College game. Probably start around 7 or so. That seems to be when we're getting started with these post-game shows after home games. Looking forward to that as well. It'll be right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Take your comments and questions about the game. We'll drink, we'll talk, and we'll commiserate about what we thought from Pitt-Boston College at Acrisure Stadium tomorrow. So looking forward to that for sure. All right, make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com so you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. And I think that about does it. Thanks for watching the videos this week, folks. Have a great Friday. We'll see you at the game tomorrow, and then definitely see you tomorrow night on the post-game show right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.